Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the next episode of Heresy Hammer. It's myself, Rob at Beowulf Miniature, joined by Lee at Death from the Shadows. Me and Lee have just been talking about his hobby and what you've been up to, Lee. But it's been a not very productive 2 weeks, although you seemed on a spurt of Iron Warriors kind of before
Yeah,
that.
it's not been good, to be
What's
honest.
uh, what's on
It's
the
not
table over
been
the next couple of days, though? Because you've got no kids now,
well.
have you? They're gone.
I need to finish. I got some.
Oh,
Well, I can't see them.
just in time, just in time.
Yeah. Well, these are that I.
Oh, mama.
There's been a lot of talk about the. Do you like the plastic ones? Do you like the resin ones? And I'm like, well, I don't care, but I've got a box load of resin ones, so
So you're gonna have to use those ones.
I might as well use them.
Yeah, that'd be good though. I like. Do you need to have a tech marine or like a forge lord to have Thalax
Forge
in?
Lord. Yeah,
Forge
you
lord.
need a
Okay,
Forge Lord,
got it.
or there's a Right of War, isn't there? I think
Okay,
you can
okay, okay.
take
Cool, cool,
them.
cool. That's interesting.
But
Okay.
yeah, Forge Lord, and then
My
you can
mind,
take.
my mind has been just full of mech. Me and Kerry sat down yesterday to work out the basically 8 episodes that it would take to cover the entire Mechanicum series. So I've lost all knowledge. All knowledge of Legions has been squeezed out of my brain, and all knowledge of Mechanicum is now just in my brain,
Well, I had
percolating and sitting
a
there.
I had a mech army for most of first edition. That
Yes, you
was
did.
that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
my main thing.
A Death
So
Guard bonded
yes,
mech
yeah,
army
yeah,
rat.
yeah.
Yeah.
So as soon as I saw the pictures of the Warhammer community thing about the plastic box set, I was like, oh no, here
Yeah.
we go.
A dangerous
So
slope.
so I figured if I do some Iron Warriors coloured ones, I can build a Forge Lord and slowly add some
Yeah.
Mechanicum
That's
to the
a
Iron Warriors.
I like that. I like that. In fact, actually the shows as a sneak peek, the shows for that so we'll do one freebie show, an introduction show. Looking at the HQ, the warlord traits, advanced reactions, etc. And the skylights actually. So the skylights can be like added to they can be like almost like bodyguard. They can take wounds even if it's a sniper shot, which is
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah.
So we're going to do them
Yeah.
in one show, and then we'll do the other 7 gajillion billion shows on the Patreon. But we'll what we're going to do, and I think the easiest way to structure it is like do a show on like Reductor, and then all the units you would typically find in the Reductor, and then we'll do like an allies list that people can use as a basis for either a
Yeah,
main
that's
list
the
or
way
a
to
allies
do
list.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my plan is just because I don't have an army at the minute, is to do the Rite of War where you can add Mechanicum. I can't fucking remember what it's called.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know exactly what I mean.
To
Yeah, yeah,
slowly build up a force
yeah,
and then eventually just run them as an allied detachment because I feel like they are a bajillion times better as an allied
yeah.
detachment than
I
than.
think there's a lot of scope for
Although,
exciting things.
I mean, not to go off track too much.
Like, we've
I think
totally
there's
gone off
some
track now. We're
flavor.
just going to embrace
I
it,
know,
basically.
yeah.
Me and Lee haven't
The
actually
Iron
spoken for a while,
Warriors.
actually. So this is us just catching up.
But the thing with the Iron Warriors is, so if you take Thalax with the Forge Lord, you get the Legion Raw.
Okay. Oh, that's quite
So
good.
so that's actually not fucking terrible.
Oh, that's great for Iron Warriors, actually. Like even like a
Yeah,
lightning gun would be
yeah,
strength
yeah,
8, right? Yeah, against like
yeah.
dreads and things like that.
So
Okay.
so you're gonna hurt dreads and tanks,
Yeah,
and you can deep
that's
strike them in or bounce them about
woo.
because they've got their funky little jetpack thing, don't they? Excuse me.
Yeah, yeah. Do
Um,
they, is it only in shooting though? So it wouldn't work on their say like melter bombs, their +1, or it's only in shooting, isn't it, the Iron
no, no,
Warriors?
no, 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 no. It's
It's not.
it's
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 against them all the
yeah,
hits.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh right.
So melt bombs.
Oh, that's good because they can
I
take melt
think
bombs, can't they?
someone's shouting at the screen, going, "No, you
No,
fucking
that's not
idiot!"
right. Okay, well, we don't care that much, but
Yeah, no.
we'll cover it, I'm sure, at a later date.
If
But
you
anyway,
pay me, I will really confidently say, "Yeah, no, it's definitely close call."
cool. And you can subscribe to our Patreon with all the tacticas on it. Yeah. So, well, however, we got sidetracked by mech because we've been talking a lot of mech off the
Uh,
show, and me and Lee haven't caught up for a while anyway. But what we're actually here to discuss is Beta-Garmon. We're talking Beta-Garmon Part 2. So, Lee put together a tour de force of an episode where he went through the kind of the system as a whole, and he went through kind of like the initial stages of the Beta-Garmon conflict, which doesn't necessarily isn't in detail in this book, but it's actually this book that we're going to go through today. So if you're coming into this episode, Beta-Garmon Part 2, and you haven't watched the Beta-Garmon Part 1, I would suggest that you go watch that Part 1 because that will give you some context for what we are about to talk about. If you just want to get straight to the meat and potatoes of the issue, then this, I guess, is an episode for you because we're mainly going to be focusing on the Khan, the Jagtai Khan, Endred Hart, and Sacrus Mundus, and what they get up to, because that is, in fact, the main kind of like narrative within the Battle for Beta-Garmon book, and that is what we're going to be going through today. However, just a quick thank you. We'll whiz through these. Just a quick thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to Battle Bling. We've talked about them loads on the show. They're a place to get all your your Legions Imperialis bits and pieces, and they've also helped us out enormously with nameplates as well for the last Solar War event. They have, in fact, I'll just mention this. Battle Builder is coming, which is going to be a website where you can create your own nameplates for your models, and then send the file to them, and then they will print it off for you. And it's really cool because I've kind of seen the
Okay.
initial, you can like customize it as you want to, etc., etc. It's really cool. Not seen anything like it. So yeah, so make sure you check out Battle Builder coming this summer. Next up, we have Beowulf Miniature Printing. Great guys over at Beowulf. They do work for me all the time, and they do work for my clients all the time as well. Great for particularly for arms, I found, but heads as well. But arms, if you need World Eaters chain axes, these are the guys to go to. Next up, we have so a new Lee. You haven't seen this one yet.
No,
So
I have seen this, but
Sacrus.
I haven't seen
Okay,
this.
yeah. So Sacrus
Yeah.
Mundus. So they can be found on Colts 3D, My Mini Factory, and Patreon as well. So there's loads of places you can access their files. So they're not 3D printers, they're digital sculptors, and they particularly focus on sci-fi terrain and kind of like fantasy terrain as well. So make sure, even if you are going to buy some of their stuff, which I recommend you definitely do, definitely go give them a follow because they've got some really interesting and cool creative ideas. So yeah, I think it would be great to get like a Prospero board done for Heresy Hammer actually. So I need to work out exactly how we'd go about doing that. But the one in the middle there, I was like, ooh, I'd love to get something like that.
Hmm.
So yes, thanks to those guys, and we're going straight into it. So I'm hoping that we won't do any breaks today, and we can just go straight through, unless we desperate because we're old men now. We might need a
I
toilet
was
break in
gonna
the middle.
say, yeah, I got the bladder of an old lady, so
So Peter Garman. So it's as we said, it's a war on an epic scale. But there's been a lot of shit kind of happening. And I think one of the things about this conflict is that up until the arrival of the Primarchs, which we'll get into in a second, it has been quite a fraught affair, particularly for the Loyalists. The Loyalists have not had an overriding commander because the warp storms have basically cut it off. So the Praetorian has not been able to influence or use his usual sway because of those warp storms. And what you have is people kind of like trickling in, armies trickling in, but also what seems to be a more coordinated traitor effort. But with the exception of you've got World Eaters kind of just rampaging and reaving through areas, and we'll come. I mean, we spoke about the World Eaters last time and kind of what they did with the Legion Inducti, creating them in their kind of like forge factories. But it seems to be a more coordinated effort. One thing I would say, and this is, I suppose, about rather than the actual narrative itself, we will come to the narrative that's going to play a big part in this episode. One thing I would say is that I think that so we did the Siege of Cathonia, and that was really a battle between two major characters. So we had the Imperial Fist kind of like
yeah.
character, and then we had the Sons of Horus character, Varian Ashuradan. And the narrative was essentially seen through their eyes, and it was those commanders kind of battling it out. What I would say is, I suppose, from a writing perspective, what they didn't want to do was kind of just copy and paste something similar. So they didn't have like a loyalist Legion commander and then a traitor Legion commander, and then it was seen through those eyes. So the narrative of this story is actually seen through the eyes of the Khan, but we get some quite significant cameos of Shadrach Meduson through the Shattered Legion, but also Endred Hart through the Black Shields as well. And they actually play quite a prominent role. They come together in kind of like some sort of Power Ranger Megazords towards the end of this story.
Voltron.
But I think that it's interesting because the narrative plays quite well into the Battle of Beta-Garmon book, which is that it covers the Shattered Legions, the Black Shields, and then a few other bits and pieces as well. But this is really actually a story of the Khan. But one thing I would say is that it's a story where we have a confrontation. We'll get to the confrontation, and perhaps we can talk about this a little bit later. A confrontation between two Primarchs, which none of us were aware of until this book dropped. So I think that there has been, and this is, I think, something that we're seeing with these kind of like campaign books, is that the team who are writing them are adding and fleshing out narrative that we haven't necessarily seen before, that isn't necessarily within the arc of the Black Library stories, which I think is actually, for me, because the Black Library stories have ended, is actually, I quite like it because it's like, oh, this little nugget of information that I didn't know previously.
Yeah, yeah,
You
definitely.
will get people who are just like, no, they're being this is a super cynical move because they're adding it in because X, Y, Z. But actually, I think because we've ended the Horus Heresy series now, yeah, it's quite cool to have a kind of like almost a mini Horus Heresy novel. But I do, like we said on the Siege of Cathonia, I do lament the fact that this is not a wider, like a bigger book, because I feel like that the story within here is quite cool, and there's some cool elements to it as well. Any initial thoughts, Lee, on this one?
Um, I mean, obviously, the main difference between this and the Cathonia book is just the scale of the
Oh,
conflict.
100%. Yeah.
Um, and I think this is why Beta-Garmon is perfect for like a campaign weekend or something,
Yeah.
because even in the books it mentions about, massive battles taking place on planets that actually don't have anything. They're
Yeah.
just fucking nothing planets that no one cares about. It's almost just a place to have a scrap.
Yeah.
And then everyone dies and a handful of people get off the planet, but no one's going to remember that. It's not going to be on any battle honors, you know. No one's going to remember the names of the people who died there. Most of them now by this stage are just inductees getting flipping chucked into wherever,
There are a lot of inductees actually in this
so
story. Yeah.
it's just real kind of mass attrition warfare,
Yeah.
which I think really lends itself to a kind of campaign weekend.
Yeah.
And then you've got these kind of handful of absolute dick kicking characters running around trying to, well, either trying to everyone on me or just no, I'm going to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah, that is very, very much the case. I mean, the antics that Endred Har gets up to, I actually thought he was loosely based on you as a character, Lee.
He's
He's an
my
absolute psychotic. It was insane.
I
Imagine
mean, as
imagine
soon
how you fought when you were in the military.
as
That's a
soon as soon as I started reading about him, I was like, did we just become best friends?
a man after your own heart.
He's
Okay,
yeah,
awesome, awesome.
he's my animal
Yeah,
spirit. He
spirit
really
animal. Yeah,
is. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, it felt like that as I was reading it yesterday. Okay, cool. Well, let's go straight into it and let's have a kind of like a recap and what happened previously. So, Bit Garment, it's a cluster. It's not one system. It's a lots of a myriad of systems, and you have different planetary governors. You've got kind of royalty that was left over from the unification period, or that initial Great Crusade period. You have agri worlds, you have mechanicum controlled worlds, so it is a real eclectic mix within this cluster. But essentially every major planet, every sector has become a battle zone, and the loyalists and the traitors are fighting kind of over it, even before we get into the actual kind of the meat and potatoes of this episode. Emissaries from Horus and small groups of traitor marines have sown discord. We've seen that with the Alpha Legion. We've seen that with Sons of Horus, and kind of, I think discord is probably the wrong word for what the World Eaters do, but just chaos, I think, is probably a better word for it. Civil war and political intrigue have thrown the sector into absolute chaos, and the World Eaters, led by Kredjak, captured the prison world of Zeta Garmon 10 and turned it into an inductide factory. And in
Just
fact, we talked about last time where they basically, the loyalists had turned up and they had found just bits of
just
failed
remnants.
inducti
Yeah.
experiments, kind of just mangled body parts. It kind of reminded me of the latest episode of The Boys with Homelander. I don't know if you have you seen the latest episode yet?
I've not caught up yet.
Okay, when you watch it, the
Yeah.
very last scene is basically how I imagine Beta-Garmon 10 to have looked. So
Okay.
when you get there, you'll be like, oh yeah, okay, that was it. So the Room Storm has largely kept reinforcements out for the loyalists, particularly the loyalists. As I say, that their kind of defense of the sector has been frenetic and really uncoordinated. But as it starts to fade, the loyalist relief fleets can begin to reach the system. So this is going to be a three-part series in total. Today we're going to talk about the Beta-Garmon Horus Heresy campaign book, and then in the third part we're going to talk about the Great Slaughter, which is all the information from the Legion's Imperialis lore, which I think Lee probably you know more about than kind of definitely me, because I think you did a lot of research on this and trying to
Mm.
coordinate and piece together the pieces of the Beta-Garmon book. So let's go on to the what's happening. I think what's happening on Terra.
I think just
Oh
all I'll
yeah,
say about this is it is like the whole sector is in complete chaos, you
yeah,
know. The loyalists really are on the back foot by now. They're kind of trying to um reinforce areas out on in the kind of outer parts of the cluster, and then Horus has taken advantage of that and started hitting the main planets.
yeah,
But then Horus isn't having it all his own way either. He's having to throw more and more people into this absolute maelstrom of just fucking carnage.
yeah,
Like the numbers they talk about is like billions dead already,
yeah.
you know, and it hasn't even really,
Begun,
really started.
not in earnest. No,
Um,
if you're a civilian living in the Beta-Garmon cluster, you're going to look to probably sell your house and move elsewhere to go to
yeah,
Ultramar or somewhere, right?
yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
not your real estate price is rock bottom right now.
But I think it's the classic thing. It's a bit like if you ever read about kind of World War II and you read numbers and it doesn't really
It's
mean
just
anything, then
meaningless,
you
isn't
just
it?
your
Yeah,
brain can't comprehend
yeah,
the
yeah,
kind of numbers of and not just that, like machinery, like the amount of Titans
yeah.
and tanks and stuff that are just getting absolutely wiped off the planet.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
it is a scale of warfare that we have yet to see. I think in the
yeah,
conflict of
yeah, yeah.
the Horus Heresy. Okay, cool. Right, let's talk about what's happening on Terra. So, Dawn knows Horus will reach Terra, of course, but he needs to buy time. He decides essentially to send Sanguinius and the Khan to go fight in the sector and to be the warlords of basically to see what he can do. But I think that um there's a calculation made, and we'll talk about exactly what this calculation is. But essentially, every second that they can waylay the traitors in the Garmin cluster is a second bought for Terra, and it's one less second. But the problem is that every defender that dies in the Garmin sector is also one less defender on the walls of Terra. And I think that Dawn essentially makes this decision that it's more important to try and waylay them. But he knows ultimately this is not a battle that he can win. That Terra is going to be the final battleground of the war. But he sends in the two Primarchs, um, knowing that they might actually be able to try and create some kind of victory, some kind of Pyrrhic
Mm,
victory at least, by waylaying the traitors. Dawn is interesting as well because within the book, Dawn is actually quite eager to go himself, but knows that that's quite irresponsible. Um, and he's desperate to fight in an actual war zone, but he knows that actually it's not the way to go about doing it. However, when he makes the decision to send the two Primarchs and announces the decision, it's interesting because high-ranking officers within the army actually um, revolt against this, and there's a mini rebellion on Terra. And I think it's interesting because it's not a revolt that's born out of kind of chaos, as in the ruinous powers, or because
mm,
they're loyalists to Horus. They're actually genuinely worried that it's a terrible idea to send the two Primarchs and their forces away from the solar system, and that actually they think that there's seed of dissent within the Primarchs that this is a cynical move by Dawn, because it could actually be that or the Primarchs are starting to turn traitor. So that's instigated by Marshal Korst. And it's really interesting because the way that they deal with it, so it's like a three-pronged approach, but essentially Sanguinius, there's some fighting on the Palatine. and sanguineous, like almost akin to Jesus.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Sort of walks amongst these people, the fighting on
yeah.
the
The
Palatine
plebs.
to kind of like quell the dissent.
Yeah.
Dawn makes a kind of like he basically messages everyone on Terra.
It's like a terror-wide vox cast, isn't it?
Exactly. It's
Yeah,
basically like, stop
yeah,
this now. This is what's happening. Like, we
yeah,
can't have dissent. But it's really interesting because the way the Khan describes, and this is actually quite an interesting one, because I think the Khan is written slightly differently in this book to how perhaps you've
yeah. I'd
seen him in
agree.
previous books.
Yeah,
But he essentially sees it as kind of like some petty bourgeois kind of a rebellion that isn't even worth his time, and he thinks it's super pathetic. And as somebody who is actually got quite a rebellious spirit and nature, I thought it was quite interesting to see that juxtaposed within this book, because the Khan, I definitely think, acts in a way that in some ways, quite a thoughtless way, in a way that I think that he acts in quite a thoughtful way in the two preceding books, which is Path of Heaven and
right.
Scars.
Interesting.
Uh,
See, I didn't see it like that. I
oh,
saw it
interesting.
as he just kind of sees it as aristocrats being
Yeah.
dickheads.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, you know what? You're all knobs. I will
Yes.
literally send my legion in to kill you all.
Because he puts
Which,
his entire legion on high alert,
yeah, yeah. Which that
and then
bit
yeah.
is unlike Khan, I guess. But I quite like the fact that he's like, oh, the posh people are at it again.
Yes,
You
some
know.
sort of bourgeois champagne
Yes.
socialist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, there probably is an element of that within the Imperium anyways.
Yeah,
So,
agreed. But
um,
it's really interesting to see the different kind of like prongs, and the difference actually between the Khan going on kind of like high alert and Sanguinius going amongst the masses is definitely something that is
yeah.
themed throughout this themed throughout this
I
story.
I really like this bit, but I feel like the gravity of the decision is less impactful
Yeah,
because we know what happens in the story.
yeah,
You
that's
know,
definitely
like
true.
if we
Yeah,
didn't know that Sanguinius and Khan both come back, spoilers,
yeah, yeah.
both come back from this, then you would be sitting there thinking, fucking hell,
This
Dawn.
is a terrible
Like you,
decision. Yeah,
if one of them dies, because it says it, like basically if one of them dies,
they're fucked.
that's
Yeah,
it. Terra's
yeah,
gone. Like we
yeah,
won't be able to defend Terra.
yeah,
The Garmin cluster's gone. And you're
yeah,
just like, so I can see where these people are coming from. And they're
yeah,
like, why the fuck are you doing this?
yeah,
But on the flip side, he also knows that the longer they can hold him in the Garmin cluster, the more chance they have of like the Ultramarines come into Terra.
yeah. Exactly.
So the more chance they have of, because he knows that they're going to lose. He knows that every step of the way they're going to lose. All he's trying to do is drag out that loss for as long as possible.
Yes. Yeah, that's
So
exactly how
so
it's
I
described.
thought
Yeah.
it was a really interesting bit, but it's kind of like I say, because we know what happened. It's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
just fucking
It's
send them.
less high stakes, isn't it? Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
cool. Let's have a look at what happens next. So the reprisal fleet. So this is what is essentially sent. And I think that this goes back to what you were saying actually, which is if you don't know the outcome, then losing 69,000 loyalist Marines, you kind of a bit like what the actual effing fuck is going on
yeah,
here? Because
yeah,
like if these guys get slaughtered in the Garmin cluster, we are screwed. And of course, they actually both legions, particularly the Scars, actually take quite heavy losses. But I won't kind of go through it kind of all in detail, but essentially 69,000 loyalists Marines go from the Scars and the Blood Angels. That's around 1,400 Legion warships, which are now not defending Terra, and a few other forces of note that are already fighting the system. So there's 3 to 12,000 Shattered Legion Marines already there. There's 2,000 Black Shields, and they're predominantly led by Endred Har. And just to say, the Shattered Legions although there might be smaller bands of Shattered Legions, the way the book makes it out is that they're predominantly led by Shadrach Meduson. Um, but there's 1.5 million solar auxilia and tanks, and then an unknown number of militia and PDF. So because it's unknown, I suspect it's many,
it's going to be
many.
billions, isn't
Yeah,
it? Yeah,
an
literally.
extraordinary fighting force.
Well, I seem to remember reading somewhere that essentially there were no civilians in the Garmin cluster by this point. Basically,
Been
everyone was given
murdered.
a weapon. It's
Mm.
like you are going to fight because you're either
Yeah,
already dead
that I remember that
or
actually.
here's a
Yeah,
weapon.
yeah, I remember that actually. Yeah,
So,
that's a good
so at
point.
that point, there is no civilians. It's
Yeah.
just go and fight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. However, they do have. Is it this on the next slide? Let's just have a look. So this is really interesting. So basically, the mortification index is so the savants on Terra, the those working in the bastion where Dawn is, they're kind of like beavering away in the Underhive, and because they are um because they're savants, they're basically working out for every life how long can we extend the war in the Beta-Garmon cluster. Like these supercomputers kind of like working it out. And it's so basically it's a vast algorithm kept secret from all used to calculate basically the value of every life that's going to fight in the Beta-Garmon cluster. But the thing is that one life is just imperceptible on this death clock. But when you're talking about the millions and billions, and then it becomes actually, a period of time. But quite a lot of the thinking is actually worked out, and Dawn is using this mortification index to work out kind of like how long it can buy him and what each life is worth. And then from that index, from that algorithm, he works out there is no winning, as Lee said. There is only a loss, but it's just about how can you slow down the death clock before it eventually ends up at Terra. So yeah, really really interesting nugget of information that.
I just love the idea of like these soldiers like, oh yeah, dickhead.
It's just
My life's
nothing.
worth 5 seconds, yours is two.
Yeah,
You're
it's literally nothing.
shit.
And it's interesting because they start because word does get out and soldiers do start to
Yeah.
brag about what their life is worth on the death clock. One person's is a minute and that would be a really long period of time. But oh fucking Johnny, he's only worth 1 second. He's total
What
dickhead.
a dickhead.
Um, so yeah, it's really, really interesting. Kind of like it's a great nugget of information
Yeah, yeah, I love
within it,
stuff
and I
like
love
that.
that
Yeah.
they're bragging about what their time is worth on the death clock of Beta Garmin.
Bragging, you know your life's shit when your bragging rights are how short or long your life will be in a
That is how
Garmin
bad,
cluster.
yeah, how bad the Garmin cluster really is, isn't it? Cool. Okay, let's have a look at what happens next. So, just to say, just before we get to the arrival, so um, in the book, just before they leave for the Garmin cluster, basically Dawn, Khan, and Sanguinius kind of get together, and it's quite interesting because Dawn makes this really long Shakespearean style soliloquy,
Yeah.
kind of talking about in a quite a pompous way, talking about kind of like what they had achieved during the Great Crusade, the history of terror, um, and he kind of rounds it off by saying, "No heroics. Whatever you do, this is not about throwing yourself into single combats. This is about a unified defense of the cluster. We can't afford to afford to use you." And
Khan's
Sanguinius is
like,
there,
hold my
sort of,
beer.
yeah, yeah. And the Sanguinius is there nodding, being like, "Oh yes, this is very sagely advice." And then the Khan's just there with his arms folded at the back,
Well,
leaning on a door,
well,
rolling his eyes,
I
being
love the
like,
way
"Yeah,
it
yeah, whatever, bro."
I love the way that describes how like Dawn just stops talking because the Khan's basically just got up and is like running his fingers along a shelf and just like staring at a cobweb in the corner,
He's
and
just
then
bored, isn't he?
realizes that Dawn stopped talking and is like, "Oh yeah, I'll come sit down again. Oh, you haven't finished."
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I think that that conversation is kind of illustrates how um closely that Khan is actually listening to the advice about no heroics
And
that
I feel like
is to
that
come.
entire conversation was aimed at Khan.
Oh,
Like,
entirely,
so,
entirely. So
Sanguinius is there just to be there, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, basically they arrive and try to take control of the Garmin cluster. There's a brief meeting between the Primates and the Defenders. It's interesting as well when they meet soldiers. Essentially, everyone, as we know, everyone is in awe of Sanguinius. Yeah, he has a calming and soothing effect. But they look at the Khan, who's not in the finery and panoply of like ceremonial dress. He's actually just dressed for war with with the Tiger Dow. And it says that basically when they looked on him walking behind Sanguinius, everyone shit their pants. And he just eventually, and I think it leans into that whole thing that the scars are seen as quite barbaric. And I think that because we've had a number of novels we understand that actually the picture of them is actually more complicated than that. They're doing like writing poetry about like murdering orcs on Chondax, right? Oh, such a beautiful
Yeah.
day as I murdered an orc.
Yeah.
But the wider
Roses of red,
Imperium,
violets of
yeah,
blue.
exactly. The wider Imperium
I
doesn't.
murdered orcs.
Yeah,
So do you.
yeah, writing haikus, yeah. So, but the wider Imperium still doesn't understand that about the scars, and perhaps would look at them in the same way they might look at them on the Space Wars. They're basically terrified, and the Khan eventually is just like, I'm going to win no accolades here. This is not me. The only way I'm going to prove myself to these people is go and kick some dick in. And
But
that's essentially what he does. He basically leaves the
yeah,
ceremony and is like, I'm off. Let's go fight.
I do
Um,
like that though. It's just the way he's just like, nah, you know what? These
yeah,
people don't like me. I'm gonna
yeah,
go now and kill
yeah,
some things.
yeah.
Like,
That's
I just
literally,
quite like he just walks
yeah.
off. It's like, yeah, fair on, mate.
Like he will prove his worth. He essentially says, I will prove my worth through my actions.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they do. And it's interesting because the scars from this point on and the Blood Angels don't fight in a coordinated way. They actually fight as separate legions. And within the book, probably every 5 or 6 pages or so it reflects back on what Sanguinius's legion is doing, and it's often quite a lot of the information from the Titan Death novel. But actually, it really focuses not on the Blood Angels. This narrative, it's going to focus predominantly on the White Scars. So let's have a look at I think their first battle. So just a note on the Shattered Legion. So Shadrach Meduson, who was a captain or a company commander within the Iron Legions. Just a little bit of background about him. So basically, after the betrayal at Isfahan 5, he essentially becomes the ad hoc leader of the Shattered Legions. Lots of it, obviously, the Shattered Legions are working in cells in the way that guerrilla warfare terrorists might work, but Shadrach is kind of a linchpin of the Shattered Legion war effort. And he's come to basically to the Garmon cluster, to the bloody the nose of the traitors. So he leads forces of the Isfahan survivors into a lightning raid on the poorly defended Sons of Horus supply convoy. There's a lot of traps in this, I will say. Lots of the loyalists keep on getting outfoxed. But basically, it's funny because they're just merciless. They fight almost like world eaters. They just go on these ships, and they're just like, "We're going to take no prisoners. We're just going to kill you all." And then the salamanders go in with their flamers, just like absolutely remorseless. They board these Sons of Horus ships that are predominantly being run by Inducti, and these are properly battle hardened veterans, and they just murder this convoy. Um, but the storage is absolutely packed to the rafters with captured mortals who are going to be used as inducti, and they're heading to Beta-Garmon. But they actually have a bit of a problem because what the Sons of Horus do, the inducti do, is actually let loose these civilians, and so the loyalist forces are having to battle through loads of people fleeing while trying to kill people as well. But I think it's pretty remorseless. It's just the image of salamanders just like flaming down everybody. It's pretty amazing. He Medusan kind of considers what to do with these civilians, and then at that point, it was a trap all along. The Sons of Horus kind of spring their trap, and dozens of cruisers burst into the warp. And actually, these inducti-led ships are just bait. And this is part of a wider effort to try and capture or kill the Shattered Legions. So more Sons of Horus kind of appear and immediately open fire. They destroy landing craft and frigates, and then they encircle Medusan's ship, intending to use enough firepower just to cripple it, but basically they're there just to blow up as many ships as they can do. And then at that point, hoving into view is the Khan's flagship, the Lance of Heaven. And there's just like one massive. It's kind of like Battlestar Galactica. Like
Yeah.
it comes
Just
along, it's like, and then this ship just explodes, and then pans a shot. It's the Lance of Heaven, and then the Khan has come to save Shadrach Meduson. So he kind of gets out of that bind, but the two actually do meet up. So if we can just go to the next one. So essentially, the Khan kind of hoves into view, saves the day. It doesn't kind of go into much about exactly how it happens. But Meduson is invited onto the Lance of Heaven to meet the Khan. And the Khan is actually quite welcoming, but Medusan is actually less than hospitable. He's actually quite rude to the Khan, and the Khan essentially says, "You need to fight with me. You are welcome to fight with me. Let's fight together." And Medusan just says, "Nah, I'm all right. Actually, we're just going to do our own thing. We've been doing our own thing for the past 7 years, so we're just going to carry on doing that." And then the Keshig, the Khan's bodyguard, basically get the hump, and they just sort of draw short swords against Medusan. But the Khan just says, "Fine, whatever. Just do your own thing. Just and essentially stay out of our way, and we'll stay out of your
I,
way."
I
Um,
really like the way it's written because basically he's just been fighting on his own for so long that it
yeah,
kind of says that he's almost forgotten what the protocol is for
yeah, yeah,
meeting
yeah,
a Primarch. He kind of doesn't care. He's just like, yeah, I just want vengeance on
yeah,
these people that murdered my legion.
yeah, 100%. And
Um,
then and
I
then
I don't
so
care for all the other nonsense.
yeah, and then the Khan. There's a line in it that basically the Khan just ends the conversation being like, "So be it," and then they
Yeah,
kind of like part ways from there. But so you've got kind of this, and we will come back to Shadrach and Medusa later on. But you've got the introduction now within the Beta-Garmon cluster of quite a significant Shattered Legion kind of like element and force that will come to play
I
in a
just
in a little bit.
I the first image I had as soon as I read Shadrach Bloody Medusan is like two sons of Horus, you know, legionnaires just sat there
Oh,
like
shut up,
cleaning
bloody Medusa!
cleaning their bolt
Fuck!
guns, and one of them's like, "Oh, supply convoy got hit, fucking Medusan," and the other one's
Shadrach.
like, "Oh, that bloody Medusan." And then it just stuck. From then on,
Yeah,
he's just known as Shadrach Bloody Medusa.
yeah. He's
Not because he's murdering things, just
no,
because
it's just
oh,
it's
that
just
fuck,
an annoyance
that
more than
bloody
anything else.
Medusa.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting, but he will play quite a prominent role in the wars to come. Let's have a look at what comes up next. So, essentially, what we have is that the Khan goes from kind of like sector to sector, but he continues his journey through the system, and then basically just killing traitors. You know, the Scars are a massive fighting force, but they pick up a distress call from a world called 678 Minoris Garmon, and it's called Baron's Landing, and they move in, and they are at this point expecting an ambush, so they move in force, but they don't detect any enemies. Lee's laughing because
Uh,
they're just a bunch of fucking idiots, aren't
uh.
they? So they make as a legion, they make planetfall, but due to weather, you would have thought weather wouldn't be an issue for futuristic space soldiers, but essentially
Yeah.
they are scattered. Um, but so it's a little bit higgledy piggledy in terms of their landing, and perhaps goes some way to explain kind of what happens next. But they do encounter survivors of the 87th Solar Auxilia cohort called the Star Reavers, and the Star Reavers are super brave actually. And the way that I would expect Solar Auxilia to kind of act around legionaries, which is they're constantly trying to um, demonstrate their valor in front of the legionaries, and they'll always put themselves in the vanguard in this kind of on this world. But they're also kind of searching for this distress beacon, and then upon discovering the distress beacon, of which the Solar Auxilia, this 87th Solar Auxilia cohort, the Star Reavers, they've said, "Come on, we've got this. We want to impress you. We'll go in the van. We'll go ahead. We'll scout out this beacon for you. You just go behind. Like we want to prove our bravery." And the car's like, "Do whatever you fucking well want.
You crack
I
on,
don't, I
mate.
don't, sure. Like we'll just be behind. We'll be walking up slowly
If
behind you, but
if
you
I
you
was a
go for
Star Reaver, I would definitely be going, oh, for fuck's
it."
sake.
Yeah, yeah, just
Not
yeah.
again.
And then essentially they find the distress beacon, these Solar Auxilia dudes, and then the Sons of Horus release another ambush. And it's interesting because lots of the forces, the Sons of Horus forces that we've encountered, particularly the ones that are associated with the Inducti, are actually forces in some way led by or commanded by Varen Ashuradan, who we see in the later events of the Siege of Lithonia. But essentially, these are all, um, Varen Ashuradan's kind of like troops, although he doesn't kind of feature in it. They are under his command. But an ambush is sprung. The Auxilia, acting as the vanguard, are basically just destroyed. And actually, it's looking pretty ropey for the White Scars. And it says in the book that the Scars actually lose 40% of their essentially their tractile vehicles
Yeah.
In this, because the savagery of the Sons of Horus is just pretty overwhelming. But eventually the Khan, just through being a Primarch and being a presence on the battlefield, does turn it around and turns it into a rout um, against the Sons of Horus. But it's actually looking quite dicey, and they land quite a significant blow. I mean, if you lose 40% of your your tanks, that's a pretty
Yeah.
savage kind of, because they fire from
Yeah.
orbit as well, but also there's lots of explosions underneath the ground, similar to what we saw in the Siege of Cathonia campaign. Yeah, it's like you can just see kind of like guys
How
sort
did
of
that go?
exploding and sinking. But yeah, so it's pretty savage. But the Khan essentially does turn it around.
We talked about this briefly before we started recording, didn't we?
Yeah,
And I have to say, this is the one part of the book that I'm not a massive fan of. I just
yeah,
found it a bit lazy. It's
yeah,
like the Khan, this godlike genius of war. Oh, I think there might be a trap.
yeah.
Let's just send everyone into it and see
Let's
what
spring the
happens.
trap.
Oh, it's a trap. Half of us are dead. How did
Yeah,
that happen? I best run in there on my own and kill everyone. The Khan
yeah.
kills everyone. I just found it a little bit lazy. I
Yeah,
thought, I don't know.
I do know what you mean, but basically, yeah, I know what you mean.
It's
You would have thought they would
just
use a bit more tactical acumen, I think,
well,
to
you're just like, this could be a trap. So let's, like, I don't know, all these spaceships, let's just bomb the fuck
bombard
out
it
of it and see what
first. Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
oh, no,
I
let's
suppose
just
they were
walk in.
looking for somebody with a distress beacon. They didn't want to bomb the people that they were looking for,
Well,
but
yeah,
I
but
can,
they've
I
got
can
no
understand
signs
that.
of life.
Yeah, fair
Yeah.
play. Yeah. Okay,
Plus, I
cool.
feel like at this point, the distress beacon, no one cares, do they? Like, there's
Yeah,
billions scared. Like,
yeah. Just more men for the grinder.
that's it. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Right, let's have a look at what takes place next. So,
Oh,
the
here he
man,
is.
the myth, the legend. So, the Fangs of the Emperor. So, these guys will definitely play an important role with this. So, just a note on Endred Ha. So, basically, he was a world eater. I think he had been sent off and segregated from the Legion. And kind of was doing his own thing at the time of the Great Crusade, but also at the
I think
outset of
he
the
was,
Horus Heresy.
does it say he was Terran born or did I imagine
Yeah,
that?
I
I
think
think
it
he's
might well be, but he doesn't
old
receive
school.
he doesn't receive the implants of the
No,
nails.
he
So he
refuses
has
them.
so
Yeah.
he has almost like the savagery of the World Eaters, but he can still hold his shit together
Yeah.
in a way that
Yeah.
they can't. But
He's
he's still an
not just a
absolute
dribbling wreck.
no,
But
but he's
yeah,
still
yeah.
absolutely psychotic in
Yeah.
every single thing that he does. So he basically is leading a force of Marines from various sources. And they differ from the Shattered Legions in the way that there's no desire to reform with any of their brothers. Basically, they are a a legion unto themselves, and they couldn't really give a shit about the greater strategic plans of the Primarchs, particularly the Khan. They don't really care about honor. They just care about making the traitors bleed. Um, and they don't care about the wider Imperial effort. Um, and it's interesting because I think because this guy does get eventually recruited, I think, to become one of the Malcador's kind of like agents, or at
Yeah,
least in the
yeah, he
previous rule
does.
books, you could
Yeah, I think yeah.
make
Yeah,
him
you're right.
a
Yeah,
a
yeah.
Grey Knight, but basically that seems to be slightly rewritten, where he's just like "fuck you all, I'm just doing my own thing," smashing shit with his strength 10 power fist. Um,
He is just the epitome of I don't give a fuck.
Absolutely, yeah,
Like,
absolutely, yeah.
and I love it.
And
Like
also, yeah,
literally
and also,
doesn't
but
give a
he is,
fuck.
but they are quite cunning because in, I say they're quite cunning. They use the same trick over and over again, which is that in the Zana book, there's an audio book, but within the book, I think it was book 6, where they talked about Zana and the Malanax kind of like Forge World, but Zana 2. Basically, he dresses up, he paints his armor in Sons of Horus
Oh
livery,
yes.
and he
Okay,
turns up. He's
yeah.
like, "Doo, doo, 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 doo. I yes, I'm definitely am a Sons of
Yeah.
Horus."
So they do the
Um,
exact same
and
in
they do
this.
exactly the
Yeah.
same thing
Yeah, yeah,
here.
yeah.
Like, yeah, fool me once.
No, no, I'm a
Yeah,
world eater.
yeah,
Yeah.
and this is exactly the same thing they do. So they use this trick
Although
again.
I guess it probably would just keep working.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
until it
not like they're
doesn't.
going to receive the facts saying if this guy turns up pretending to be a world eater, don't let him in. You
Is he
know, like
not?
that's just not happening, is it?
Yeah.
So
So, but
yeah, if it
he uses
works,
this ploy more than once, which is interesting because I think that there's definitely an argument, and this goes to hobby and modeling. You could paint him in any bloody panoply you wanted because he's
yeah,
always going around
yeah,
in
yeah,
disguise.
yeah.
So I think
I
yeah,
just
World Eater
imagine
Sons of Horus.
like a stick on moustache and some fucking glasses with goggly eyes. No, no, I'm not Ha. Ha? Never heard of him. No, 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 no.
Right,
Fuck
yes.
off.
You get serious brownie points. We want to see that next on the Instagram. Ha incognito. Hashtag ha incognito. Right, okay, let's have a look what happens next. Anyway,
Oh,
just a
God.
bit of background about the Fangs of the Emperor
Oh.
there. So basically, but he does exactly that. So he reaches the traitor controlled starfort of Axoma Pass. He pretends he pretends to be a world eater. Well, I don't know who like the tech like savants like just be like, oh, do we have to fucking airbrush this armor again? Jesus fucking Christ. Gotta sand it down and then airbrush it. To be a traitor world eater is to gain docking access. He's minus I wonder if we put like novelty kind of like
I was going to say, like, do
um
they stick on fake
butcher's
nails?
nails, yeah. But essentially he tricks them into being like, yes, I'm a world eater. They land immediately, they drop their disguise, and then they start to butcher the garrisoned solar auxilia while they're there. And you can see here, this is, perhaps to make it clear, this is just happening in different sections of
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
Garmin,
yeah,
Garmin
yeah.
cluster. They fight with not only standard armaments, but also Xenos weaponry as well. So they're properly a
Mm.
higgledy-piggledy group of badasses, these guys. And then Har basically enters the fray personally, and he's only ever going after scalps. He's basically trying to hunt down this Solar Auxilia commander, Otura Pine, who's basically just legged it. It's like, fuck,
Oh, fuck.
fucking
He's
get to
not a world
the,
eater.
get to the escape pods
Bastard.
quickly. And then Har is just hunting with his strength 10
Pulls
or
his
12
fake
power fist.
moustache off.
Ta-da! Have you? And he's just wants to murder this toughness 3 mook. But basically, Pine is ordering his men to sell their lives to try and escape. But the pod, as he's kind of like pressing the button to close the doors, the pod fails to launch, and Har just catches up with him, and it just
It's like
gets
The
him fucking
Shining, isn't it?
splattered against the inside of his escape shuttle. And it's really interesting because they find the star fort absolutely chock a block with armaments and invaluable gear for the war effort. You're talking hundreds and thousands of tanks, land raiders, you're talking rhinos, you're talking, every, Sakarans, every um, tank that you can imagine, it is there. And obviously, because these guys are absolutely fucking psychotic, their plan is just to be like, let's blow this fucking shit up.
Yeah.
So let's just have a look what happens. Let's just have a look what happens next. So it's at this point that um, the Hound and Judhar and the Warhawk kind of meet up. So basically, they kind of just chance upon each other. And then, the Fangs are destroying traitor stations across the system. And then at 248 Minoris Garmon, the Khan's fleet encounters Endred Har. At Minoris Garmon, this is where there's loads of tanks. So at the repair facility, it's stocked with thousands of anti-traitor tanks, Predators, Vindicators, Scorpiuses, and they're all ready to go. Like the Loyalists could use these, and this would be a massive boon to the Loyalist war effort. And they're about
Especially as the Khan just lost half his
I know,
tanks.
fucking hell, yeah. And and they're about ready to be shipped off to a world called Dietus or Data. We'll call it Datus, I think. And the Khan basically says, "I know what you're fucking like. Do not go and blow up all these tanks. I need them. Preserve them. They're not to be blown up." And the Khan's just like,
Boom.
sorry, the magician.
I just
I
love
was
it.
like, "Fuck you, man."
I just have this image of them all stood around giggling,
I
like
know,
Khan told us not to do
yeah.
this.
And so basically, they do blow it up. They blow it all up, and the Khan absolutely is furious. He descends to the wreckage and finds Har. Backhand slaps into the floor. And Har tries to kind of like get up and tries to fight. And the Khan is just obviously because it's the Khan and a Primarch, he just backhands
Yeah.
him. And then it's just pretty fraught, but they don't have a very pleasant first meeting. And eventually, the Khan draws his blade, holds it to the Hound's throat, and tells him his men now are under his command to the 5th Legion. And then Ha, kind of this section, this page ends with Ha saying, "You will fail in your endeavor, Warhawk, unless you heed me now. I know more of the Garmin cluster than you would suppose." So there is something going on, something else going on in the Garmin
Dun
cluster
dun dun.
beyond just the what appears on the surface, which is just the war effort. So, so they don't have a great first meeting, and basically the Khan interrogates Endred Ha, and slightly unwillingly, Ha basically tells him of this world called Datos. So let's just go to the next part.
Can I just say that
Yeah.
this part of the book made me want to throw all my Iron Warriors in the bin and just start a Fangs of the Emperor
Oh, mate.
army?
Yeah.
Because I'm
They
just
are
like,
total
this
badasses,
guy
aren't
is
they?
my fucking hero.
Yeah. He's an absolute badass. But
It's the way
basically,
the Khan lands on the planet and he's watching them approach with his like command squad, just kind of all walking around. And it literally says they're all chuckling as they're like killing these like wounded sons of Horus. They're just like sticking the bullet in them and giggling away. And he's like
yeah.
the Khan is just absolutely
What
revolted.
is going on? It's funny, isn't it? Because like at this point, none of the White Scars are laughing while they're killing. You know, they've kind of like lost that element of their whole persona.
Yeah.
But Ha kind of is very kind of
It's,
like very like that about what the Scars used to be. But essentially, basically at this meeting, as the Khan has kind of like backhanded him, Ha unwillingly kind of shares the information that there's something going on Datus. So the Khan's entire fleet strikes at that planet. I think Endred is fucked off by this point. Um, and then at this point, they launch a full planetary invasion of of the planet, obviously. Um, and this is the second time that they do this. Like they're not doing things by halves. They're absolutely going for it. So they commit to a full planetary invasion the moment that they arrive in system. And but it's quite interesting the way that this is described, because essentially on the planet there is a series of feints. Now these feints don't necessarily look like feints because the White Scars have committed to quite heavily to different parts, but essentially it's to draw the Sons of Horus away from the Khan's primary target. And then Ha's information is that Horus, the Horus, intends to perform a dark ritual at a site called Gar's Ahmad, which is God's throne in Chthonian. Now, I just want to read what this looks like because it was difficult in my head to kind of get a feeling of what this looked like. So, the structure of Gar's Ahmad, although obscured by the thick cloud cover that enveloped the planet, was visible to the multispectral augurs of every vessel in the fleet, set within an octagonal perimeter of concentric curtain walls that had existed since before Imperial records began. Unmistakably, the architecture of some lost civilization, the Gar's Ahmad was a plateau-top pyramid formed from cut stone, each the size of a Minotaurium container. I'm just gonna. So essentially, the throne is a massive ancient pre-human kind of structure that the Sons of Horus have massively fortified, and the White Scars, their primary assault, the one led by the Khan, launch a huge Terminator assault with solar support to disable the air defenses so they can land more troops. And then they encounter large numbers of roving world eaters who attack with no coherency or structure, despite company level strength. So it is a pretty fort. You know, the Khan is trying to make his way there. There's lots of different kind of battles taking place on the planet, but the primary target is essentially the God's throne. That's where they're going because they know that Horus will be there, according to the information of Endred Ha.
Just a side note, I love how the World Eaters are written in this because they
Oh
really
yeah,
have, they're no longer a legion now, are they? They're just
no,
roving bands
yeah,
of fucking
that's
lunatics
exactly what it
who
is.
every
Yeah,
so often get together to have a scrap.
yeah, that's exactly what it is. So the Khan leads a mass descent from the sky at the forefront of a host of jet bikes and speeders and crash into the World Eaters' lines. And after a night of brutal fighting, because this is one of the things that actually does say that actually, day turns to night and then night turns to day. This is a very, very, very long kind of like Legion battle. So after a night of brutal fighting, thousands are dead, but the Scars control the walls. And the throne grate is breached by a Legion Mastodon, smashing through it, forming an armored corridor and opening fire on the mass Sons of Horus with massive mounted weapons, which is a really cool scene. Great to see the Mastodon there, but again, it's like just smashes into these walls, and that's where all the White Scars are basically being like funneled through this Mastodon. And then this is the moment. So as the Khan reaches the top of the throne, a thick, oily smoke descends, concealing the main battlefield. And there stands Horus with the Juster and Malagas. Now, this kind of, I think basically the way that it's described in the book is that Horus is super duper, like post the events of the Vengeful Spirit book, where he kind of goes into a warp for like 10,000 years and then comes back with all his powers. The way that it's made out is it's not just a communion with the dark gods, but actually it's to further enhance his powers. And then, and you go back to what Dawn said, where he basically was just like, no heroics.
Don't do anything
Do not throw
stupid.
yourself into a battle that you could potentially lose. He does that, and actually at every point in the way he does quite foolish things actually, and which is, I think, in some ways it's characteristic of the Scars Legion. But I think that I always think the Khan is quite a thoughtful, like, general, and
Yeah, yeah,
wouldn't make a move without thinking about it. But this just seems uncharacteristically um kind of
stupid.
thoughtless of the, yeah,
Yeah.
thoughtless of the Khan. Essentially the Khan attacks him, um and then Horace is just, he looks bored. The way it's described is just like, you know, like Keanu Reeves from The Matrix. He's just kind of like dodging things, and they can't do anything about it. And then Horace just kicks him in the chest, and then he's about to launch the blow, and just kill the Khan. Like, it's not even it's not even a two-sided battle. This is a one-sided battle. The Khan has made a massive error in judgment. But at that moment, something then happens. And then to the rescue. They're in orbit. The Khan's lightning assault on the planet has left his fleet in a precarious position, and they progressively lose control of the void space. They are losing a number of ships at this point, and multiple vessels, including the flagship Lance of Heaven, has been boarded. And so actually the White Scars fleet is in danger of being lost. Basically the Khan has overcommitted himself. That's essentially what it comes down to. And if Horus is there, then you know that the Vengeful Spirit is going to be there as well. But luckily, hoving into view, Medusan and the Shattered Legions arrive, and they help to turn the tide of battle. But they're essentially there because they're trying to pursue Tibalt Mar, and then we can talk about the rivalry between Tibalt Mar and Shadrach Medusan later on. But essentially,
Bloody Medusan.
he basically turns up and then kind of intervenes. The Shattered Legions, led by Shadrach Medusan, they board the Lance of Heaven and purge it of the Sons of Horus. And then it's interesting at this point because as the Shattered Legions, as Medusan's been kind of like going around the galaxy, kind of like killing traitors, they're also kind of like picking up loads of Dark Age technology stuff. That relic mission that we all used to play. Like
Yeah,
they have controlled
yeah,
the
yeah.
relic, and they're picking up loads of Dark Age technology. So basically, what happens is the Iron Hands, once they get to the Lance of Heaven, they sort out the Vox which is being jammed, but they can't use traditional teleportation. And then they kind of like plug something into the computer and they go, look, we're going to beam you aboard. But we don't really know what could happen to you. We just know that it could work, but we
Oh
don't, it's
God.
untested. So they
Oh
take this
no.
massive risk, and then they get the Khan aboard the
What's the
Lance of
film
Heaven.
Human Centipede? Is it? Is it the
Exactly. Like, yeah,
yeah.
you got, yeah,
Oh
multiple
God.
Khans just like linked to each other. Um, but basically, as he's about to swing World Breaker down, they manage to get the
No.
Khan off world just in the nick of time.
I mean, I
Um,
have to say, how long was he holding the mace in the air? Because I feel like a lot happened in that
yeah, I know,
time.
right?
And
But
right? Horace is there, mace in the air, about to fucking slam it down on Khan's head. Khan disappears, and Horace just goes, bloody Medusan.
it's interesting because the way that it then describes kind of Horus is that he kind of like, you know, it's almost like he's expecting it. He just gazes into the distance. He's not angry.
Right,
He's
okay.
almost just like, he's at this
I knew
point,
this was going
he's
to happen.
unfazed by it, and in the duel it describes them. I say
I
duel,
mean,
it's not much of a duel, but basically he's almost looking past the Khan, so he's
yeah, okay.
not even cognizant of what's going
The
on.
the one thing I would say is, does the Khan at this point know that Horus is basically like Horus, super Horus, warp infested Horus. Because
Yeah, I don't think so because I think the
no,
information. No, I don't. I'm not necessarily
because then I
sure.
guess
No,
if he's thinking this is just normal Horus, then
I could
yeah,
maybe
I
take him. Yeah,
yeah. So I kind of get it
yeah,
because he doesn't realize that Horus is off his tits on warp aids.
yeah. You would have thought. You would have thought that. That because I think Sanguinius doesn't know or has some kind of inkling that he has changed. But I don't know. I
Right,
think
but he
whatever
keeps a
happens,
lot of that
he
to himself, doesn't he?
yeah.
He
But I think
doesn't
whatever
talk
happens,
about.
the Khan overcommits. Even if he overcommits the entire legion. I think he's lost so many ships at this point. The Void
Yeah,
War is being lost as well. So yeah, massively overcommits. I think on this one. But anyway, let's have a look at what happens next. So the combined fleets of the White Scars and the Shattered Legions basically leave Datus, running with their tail between their legs. The Khan and Medusa spend many hours in council, with the Khan growing respect for the Shattered Legion's way of war, understanding that they cannot win overwhelming battles, but can pick the correct targets and do the most damage without any grand
mm,
accolades. The Khan reflects on how the Garmon campaign had been fought and then planned, and Medusa convinces the Khan that a great victory can be achieved in the gene forges of Zeta-Garmon if they can be destroyed. And we mentioned Zeta-Garmon last time. I think we mentioned it last time, which is where the Inducti essentially kind of being created. So Zeta-Garmon has been largely untouched by the war so far. It's home to the vast traitor gene forges using captured population to mass produce inductile reinforcements for the Sons of Horus. So basically, they both travel there with the remains of their kind of like Legion forces. The Khan and Medusan discover that this is amazing. The Khan and Medusan discover that basically is already in open warfare because
mm.
who is already there
Fucking
but
hell.
Endred Hart himself, and he is already assaulting the
Blowing everything
world.
up.
Yeah. So Hart makes absolutely zero attempt to contact him or the Khan, and seeing that they have attacked with no strategy, they were now in danger of being overrun. He tells Medusan he may be interested in assisting in the space battle, but upon hearing that Hart has launched an orbital assault, he basically has to commit the White Scars to the surface to actually make sure the because I'd be tempted just to leave them here. I'd be like, well, you kind of deserve this, but I suppose that they see them as a force that is actually kind of doing damage to the traitors, so there's no point in losing them needlessly. Um, so the fangs of the Emperor's spacecraft are destroyed in orbit just after completing their drop, having made too bold an advance and getting caught between defensive weapons and the gravity well as well. And it's interesting. Again, this is, I think, over and over again, overcommitment by the White Scars, overcommitment by the Fangs, and the Shattered Legions have to intervene to actually kind of like stop it turning
Seems to
into an
be a
absolute rout.
recurring theme, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
So the Scars ground assault concentrates on areas where the Fangs have become pinned down and at risk of being destroyed. Their armor and jet bites destroy defensive positions that were decimating the Fangs. So basically, they come in, save the day. The Khan follows Ha's trail of wanton destruction to Gene Natus 17. He orders his force to form a defensive perimeter around it, as the Black Shields had made no effort to do so. So they're basically clearing up the mess with kind of Ha and his units kind of like stampeding forward. But upon entering find the Black Shield and the Sons of Horus in bitter, entrenched combat. I'm going to read this bit to you in a second. But Ha is at the point that the Khan walks in. Endred Ha is actually in a duel with a Contemptor before Ha basically pulls out his automatic core and it kind of goes like nuclear in his hand. I think that might be a duel, like in the duel category, a Contemptor versus Endred Ha would be quite cool as a Golden Demon
Yeah,
entry.
yeah, yeah, I
I
like
think it'd be
that.
really,
Yeah,
really, really cool.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and then Ha continues the assault, including at one point beating a Sons of Horus to death with his own dismembered arm. And it's interesting this because, like, so basically what you've got is this facility, Khan fighting nearby to Endred Ha. They can see each other, and then just Ha just doing this absolutely mental stuff, ripping the arm off of a legionary, smashing him around the face with it, and then sort
Fucking
of Khan is there just kind of like chuckling, being like, this guy's all right. This he's actually
This guy.
he's actually okay. I quite like
I
him.
imagine Har beating this guy to death with his arm and then turning around to Khan and like winking and laughing, going, "Don't worry, he's armless."
Yeah, so this is how it's described. So I thought I'd just read this bit. So Har crushed the windpipe of an unhelmed warrior with a blow to the throat. The next he wielded the dismembered limb of one of the sons of Horus' sons as a weapon against the warrior he had detached it from. And the Khan could not help but find humor in the situation and allowed a smile to spread across his blood-splattered face. I thought that was really good bit of humor in a quite
Yeah, I
black
like it.
humor.
I like
Uh,
it.
within this. So basically, they're fighting this facility, but 90% of the Sons of Horus that they encounter, they are actually inducti. So you've got a Primarch led by hardened White Scars veterans versus Endred Harb's mob, but they didn't really stand much of a chance.
No.
But at the center of this gene forge is a huge banks of progenoid glands ready for implantation. Obviously, the thing that makes Space Marines, which are mainly all put to fire. However, Beta-Garmon is left to Har and the Fangs of the Emperor, who basically end up taking a lot of those progenoids for themselves, and then from that captive population that there is on the planet, they basically take them, and then they create inducti for the Fangs of the Emperor themselves. So I think that there is no good guys and bad guys here. This is not. There is no. Yeah. This is a complex situation. And then finally, you know, basically it ends with an epilogue, which is that they're not fighting there. Khan isn't there for 7 years, and actually, it's not clear how long the Khan actually fights there for, or it's not clear how long the two Primarchs are in the system for. But essentially, 7 years of combat within the Garmin sector. Billions are dead. Entire planet's just gone. The Garmin sector's lost, but Sanguinius and the Khan live, and they have to some extent hurt the traitors. I mean, even that example, they've destroyed the progenitor glands, which were going to be used for indoctrination and making more inducti. So they have made a difference. But I think the Khan in particular has received a bloody nose from the fighting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Terra is obviously pleased that the two Primarchs are due to return to the Imperial Palace, but everybody knows the truth that there is now no stopping Horus and that he will
Bum, bum,
return to
bum.
Terra. And that is how the book finishes out. And that is the kind of like the key events of the Garmin cluster. Um, so that is the end. That's the end of kind of like the narrative element of the battle for Beta-Garmon. It was quite a rip roaring story. But we will go through kind of the information of the great slaughter. I think that so personally for me, I quite like the introduction of the Shattered Legion and the Black Shields as kind of like fighting forces. And I think that if you were to do a force after listening to that, I can totally see how you'd be totally geared up for it and kind of like, oh, this, have Endred Har in like the plate of the World Eaters or whatever, leading like other kind of World Eaters
With a
clad
stick-on
Marines or something.
mustache.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty cool story. And it was nice to see the Khan as the protagonist to mix it up from the Siege of Chthonian books where we had kind of like an antagonist and a protagonist. But I think that the Khan made some less than ideal tactical decisions in that, which I just felt was probably a little bit uncharacteristic for the Warhawk.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed the story of Har.
Yeah,
Um, I just think it's brilliant.
it's
Like
great,
it's
man.
just awesome. Yeah. Um, yeah, love it. And like you say, the introduction of the Shattered Legions of bloody Medusan.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
very cool.
I'm not so keen on the way the Khan's written in this.
Yeah,
I don't know. It just like you say, their way's always been like they're seen as savages, but actually, they're masters of like
yeah,
the lightning attack. So when
yeah,
he's talking to Medusan and it's like, oh yeah, this is how we've
yeah,
overwhelmed larger forces. It's like that's literally what the Khan does. That's
yeah,
literally his legions, lightning strikes, get
yeah,
in, fuck them up, get out.
yeah,
So yeah, I'll be honest, I enjoyed it, but I don't know. I feel at times it was probably a little bit obvious, a little bit lazy, like the
Yeah,
bit where they just like, oh, I think this could be a trap. Let's walk in there and see what happens. Oh, it's
yeah,
a trap. It's
yeah,
like, really?
yeah,
Is this what a, God, literally, quite literally a God of War would do?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh, we've just lost half our tanks. Well, I thought it might be a trap, but you never know. Like, fuck, if
Yeah.
that was your boss, you'd be like, shit the bed. We doing this again, Khan? We told you before. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I just felt like I don't know. I think like it could have been handled a bit differently. I think you could have
It,
had the
yeah,
same end result, but just been a bit
yeah.
more intelligent with how they
It,
got there.
it was interesting because the way that Sanguinius is portrayed, because we didn't really talk about Sanguinius at all in that, but
No.
the way he's portrayed is that he's making almost the opposite decisions to Khan.
Yeah.
Like he hears that Horus is on the same planet as him, or he hears that Horus is nearby at least, and he can make the decision to go after him if he wanted to. He has the men, and he could do it, but he decides actually that's not what the Praetorian commanded him to do. He said no heroics, like you've got to make them bleed. So it is juxtaposed, and I suppose that actually in the book, Sanguinius is portrayed as the careful one, and the Khan is the reckless one. So yeah.
I
Anyway,
mean,
what? Oh, sorry. Yeah, go for it.
Sanguinius literally knows that there's because the biggest problem the loyalists had at this point, like we kind of mentioned at the beginning, was you had lots of commanders commanding the loyalists, and they all wanted to do their own things. You had lots of forces fighting lots of
Yeah,
different little battles, and there wasn't any kind of command and control. And Sanguinius basically knows, like, I need to get all these people fighting under my banner. If I go and attack this thing here, they will all come to me.
yeah,
Whereas the Khan, which I do like this about the Khan, because this is how you would expect the Khan's just like, fuck you all. I'm going to go and smash something over here.
yeah,
So I do like the way they're written in the sense that Sanguinius is doing what he's told and Khan
yeah, yeah,
kind of isn't, but is fighting his own fight.
yeah, yeah.
I just don't like the way he went about doing things. It just doesn't feel like the
Feel
Khan.
very Khan like. Yeah,
It's not intelligent. It's just like, yeah,
very, very,
okay.
very, very reckless. Yeah, yeah,
Like you say, like he starts losing his fleet. It's like,
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
this is a master of
That's
lightning
quite
attacks.
serious there. Yeah,
He
yeah,
knows that he has to get out.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah, get in, but you have to get out.
yeah,
So
yeah.
just stuff like that. I wasn't a huge fan of.
Yes. Cool,
But
cool,
I did
cool.
enjoy it. I
Yeah,
did
it was good.
enjoy it,
Yeah, it was
and
yeah, very, very interesting. Anyway, we will continue in June with that one. Now, you might be wondering where is all the hashtag Heresy Hammer stuff. We are putting that into a community show. So we're going to start doing a community show soon. It's been a somewhat busy month for us all, with lots of stuff going on in our lives at the moment. So it will either be this month, maybe in the next couple of days, or it will be come in. Well, it is June now. It says coming in June. I think that should actually say coming
I
in
mean, it's
July.
literally like the end of
Yeah,
June.
no, yeah. So that should say
It's
coming in
the
July. But the
25th.
community show will probably come in July as well. So keep on using that hashtag Heresy Hammer because the community show is coming with all your emails and lists and etc. etc. But it's just been a particularly fraught and busy month for us all here. So okay, let's have a look at just to say thank you to our final sponsors, Dan from Gate 3D Printing. I saw Dan this weekend. In fact, he was at Baz's sculpting course and showing off his wares. He
Ah,
had a really nice Aeonid Thiel model that he's kind of got commissioned, and it was absolutely amazing. It looks really, really cool in the flesh. So make sure you get any bespoke prints done from him, and also Bit Sponsor to get all your bits. You know, if you're looking for 5. Marines rather than a pack of 20, then these guys are the guys to go to. If you're looking for a Vexilla sprue, these guys are the guys to go to. And they also offer free shipping on things over £25, but you can also get 10% off if you use Heresy Hammer, all in caps as well. So thank you to you guys for sponsoring the show. And thanks to Kirton Games as well. If you're looking to buy and pre-order all your bits, I'd really recommend those guys because really swift delivery, packaged really, really well, and really great communication from those guys as well. So make sure you check out Curtain Games and make sure you give them a follow. There's loads of events that they run, Heresy events as well. So make sure that you give those a follow. Make sure you get to their events. Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you to our top tier Praetors. I think looking at how many members we've got like over 500 members of the Patreon at the moment. But these guys are our top tier, our best friends of the show, who get all sorts of goodies and prizes. But without these guys in particular, we would not be able to do all the wonderful things that we have been doing over the past 2 years. And a special shout out to you guys because you part with your hard-earned cash so we can continue making content, and we really, really appreciate it. And those top tier patrons, so that list grows longer by the day. In fact, I think we had somebody new only join yesterday, along with 7 other people. 7 other people joined our paid
Jesus.
Patreon yesterday. So thank you ever so
Balls.
much to you guys as well. And then finally, keep on using that hashtag Heresy Hammer. Please make sure if you have got this far and haven't subscribed, then please make sure that you do as well. And then if you want to send in any correspondence, any lists, any questions you want us to cover in our community show coming up, then do let us know with hashtag heresyhammer30k@gmail.com. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the Patreon for as little as £3 a month. You get loads of access. Well, you get all the access to everything that we're doing. We're about to do a massive Mechanicum series in kind of the next month or so. We're about to start that one. I've just finished a spooky month of doing Esoteris and Galvor back, which has been a really interesting kind of 2 episodes doing some deep dives into them. But also you get advanced early access tickets to our events as well, 2 of which is Solar War, so I'm hoping to do that one at the end of the year again. And then also Baz is going to be doing another course in mid-January 2025. Seems like a long way away, but we need to book these things in early. So if you're looking for an early Christmas gift for yourself and you are considering one of Baz's classes, that one might be the one for you. But I can tell you, I think by the time we had dished it out to Patreons, I think we had only 1 or 2 tickets left for Baz's course. So if you aren't on the Patreon, you basically will miss out. So just bear that one in mind. Anyway, it's thank you from me and thank you from Lee, and we shall see you on the next one. Take care, guys, and we shall see you soon. Bye now.
See you later. Bye bye.